Hey everyone, it's Michelle from the Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center, and today I'm hanging out with my friend Kenai, who is very happy to get some attention today. So of course, if you don't know, Kenai here is our only bachelor at the Wolf Center. Unfortunately, his companion Makui did pass away last year, rather unexpectedly. She had a heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which unfortunately the only symptom of that is a sudden fatal heart attack. So he's been alone for a little while. We are still looking for a companion for him. So hopefully we will be able to find him one here pretty soon, but it is definitely like an arranged marriage, so it can be pretty difficult. Now, Kenai here, he is a British Columbian and Tundra wolf mix. So if you've been paying attention to our wolf news here in Colorado, which I'm sure if you've been following along with our videos, you already know that 15 of the wolves that we reintroduced into our state did come from British Columbia. Now, a lot of people do have misconceptions that these guys are bigger, faster, and stronger than wolves that we've had here historically, which is not the case. All of our gray wolves are going to be about 100 pounds on average for males and about 80 pounds on average for females. Now, Kenai here, he is definitely one of our bigger wolves, but he still doesn't break that 100-pound mark. So there he goes. All right, so one of the biggest questions that we get all the time, or maybe one of the biggest myths that I hear all the time, is that wolves don't actually go after the old, the sick, and the weak animals, but instead they tend to go after healthy animals. And that is a myth. So it is true. Wolves will eat the old, the sick, and the weak, or sometimes the very young wildlife. Now, one of the things that a lot of people are concerned about is that wolves maybe sometimes eat deer fawns. However, even in areas where we don't have wolves, over 60% of deer fawns will never see their first birthday. Unfortunately, most wildlife is born to die before their first year, which is just an unfortunate reality. And that goes for wolf pups too. Only about 50% of them will ever get to see their first birthday. Now, in the case of wolves, the reason why they like to go after those old, sick, and weak animals versus really healthy animals is because, unlike mountain lions, the only thing that they have to hunt with is going to be those 42 teeth that they have in their mouths. Now, they do have really strong jaws, that is to hold on to deer and elk. However, they prefer to hunt those really old animals because it is less dangerous for them. Even though wolves hunt in packs, they are not super successful in hunting. Only about 10 to 15% of the time will they actually be able to catch their prey. All right, so Kenai has decided he is just going to be walking around instead of hanging out for the video, which, if any of you know Kenai, that is pretty common for him. So, like I was saying, only about 10 to 15% of the time that wolves go hunting are they actually successful in catching their prey. And even with hunting in packs, they tend to not be able to take down those really strong animals, and instead they go after those old and weak ones, because going after an animal that is strong and healthy means an incredible risk to a wolf. And in fact, studies in Yellowstone National Park have shown that about 25% of wolves that die in the park actually have at some point in their lives experienced blunt force trauma or some type of skull fracture. And so therefore, they have a very short lifespan of only about 5 to 7 years in the wild in places that they are not being hunted. Other studies that have been done in Yellowstone also show that the average age of elk that is captured and eaten by wolves is 15 years old. Now, personally, I didn't even know that elk lived to be 15, but that is much further than their reproductive prime. And so by eating these older animals, that leaves more of these wonderful grasses and browse for the healthy animals to continue on, reproduce, and survive. So because wolves do take out those older animals, it makes those elk herds a lot stronger. So same thing, sometimes people will say, oh, well, I've seen them eat those big giant bull elk. Well, sometimes after the rut has occurred, wolves might target those weak elk after the rut because they are in those poor body condition. They've lost a lot of weight. Sometimes they're injured from battles with other bull elk. And so then wolves, once in a while, will start to go after those old, sick, and injured bull elk. Again, leaving those strongest to survive and continue reproducing the next year, so we can see those herds increase in strength and size and number. And that's why in a lot of the states where we have wolves, like Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, even with a healthy wolf population, our elk populations are on the rise. Now, sometimes people will say, oh, well, you know, my grandpa hasn't had any success in the last couple of years since we've had wolves. However, that might be, but then maybe somebody down the road who hasn't had success is now having better success. But overall, all those states actually have higher elk populations now. Montana's elk population has increased to well over 100,000 animals. Last time I looked, they were about 60% over their elk population goals. So elk are doing just fine in all the states, and a lot of it not necessarily saying that wolves are the cause for the elk population increase, but because the wolves are taking out those old, sick, and weak animals, it is allowing for those stronger ones to survive and continue going, and therefore again making those herds a lot stronger. So again, it is a myth that wolves will go after healthy deer and elk. They don't want to get hurt, as again, all they have to hunt with is their face. And even though they got big old noggins, they are not that strong to withstand those big kicks from those big, strong animals like elk or moose or even bison if they're out in Yellowstone National Park. So they definitely prefer to go after those sick animals. There's a lot of really great studies done by Voyager's Wolf Project as well that show the way that wolves will eat deer in that ecosystem and in that eco-region. So definitely check Voyager's Wolf Project out as well. And then also that Yellowstone Wolf Project for all those stats and statistics on the ages and everything that these wolves do tend to eat. So again, we do love having our wolves back here in Colorado. We have the largest elk population of anywhere in North America. So being able to have our wolves back here is going to be a win for our elk populations and our elk because they're going to end up strengthening those herds and hopefully will help with chronic wasting disease, because unfortunately Colorado is the birthplace of chronic wasting disease. So we hope that you have learned a few things today. If you have any questions or if there's anything else that you would like us to answer or learn, please leave a comment below and we'll be happy to answer them in an upcoming Wolf Talk.